the long road up. Stories of grit, failure, and the relentless human spirit. There's a question I've asked myself 1,000 times over the years. How do you keep going when life keeps knocking you down? It's a question that doesn't have just one answer. It's not a single sentence you can tape to your bathroom mirror and expect all your problems to disappear. It's not a cute quote you post on Instagram and then magically wake up stronger the next day. No, real resilience, the kind that pulls you up from rock bottom, is messy. It's slow, it's personal, and it's different for everyone. But this is what I've learned, and what I'm about to share with you. It started for me, like it does for most people, with failure. Not the small kind. The ugly, humiliating, soul-crushing kind of failure. I was 28, living in a crummy 2-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates in a rough neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. The walls were thin. The plumbing didn't always work. And there were nights I'd fall asleep listening to sirens and drunk people yelling outside. I was broke. More than broke, I was drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out, student loans unpaid. My car an old 2002 Toyota Corolla with 200,000 miles on it, had a cracked windshield and smelled like stale coffee and hopelessness. Worse than all that, I had just lost my 3rd job in 2 years. Fired. Again. This time for showing up late too many times. Even though I had been busting my butt working nights at a warehouse to cover rent, and couldn't keep my eyes open during my day shift at the call center. And the cherry on top? My girlfriend of 4 years had finally had enough. She left a post-it note on the kitchen counter. I'm tired of waiting for you to figure it out. And just like that, she was gone. That night, sitting on the floor of my bedroom with an unopened can of cheap beer in my hand, I hit my lowest point. I thought about giving up. Really giving up. The scary kind. But here's where the first lesson happened. Because as I sat there, scrolling aimlessly through YouTube, an autoplay video popped up. It was a speech by Les Brown. If you don't know Les Brown, you need to. He's a motivational speaker, a former radio DJ, a man who had been labeled educably mentally retarded in school, and yet, somehow, rose to become one of the most electrifying public speakers in the world. In this video, he shouted into the microphone, "You gotta be hungry." And for some reason, something inside me stirred. Hungry? I hadn't felt hungry for anything in months. Thomas, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Inky Johnson. It was like a drug. But for my soul, the next morning, I got up early for the first time in weeks. Did I have a job? No. Did I have a plan? Not really, but I showered. I shaved. I made a list. 3 things. 1. Apply for at least 5 jobs today. 2. Walk 2 miles just to move my body. 3. Write down 3 things I'm grateful for. That second item, the walk, turned out to be more important than I expected, because 2 blocks from my apartment, I passed a small gym. Nothing fancy. Old weights. Worn out treadmills. But there was a sign in the window. First week free, no excuses. I walked in. That day, I lifted weights for the first time in nearly a year. I wasn't strong. I wasn't fit. I could barely bench the bar. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than hopeless. And that was enough. Over the next few weeks, things didn't magically get better. My bank account stayed low. Bills kept coming. Job interviews turned into rejection emails. But every morning, I showed up at that gym. Every afternoon, I sent out resumes. And every night, I watched motivational speeches until I fell asleep with my headphones in. Then, something happened. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a small moving company. Entry level, hard labor, but steady pay. I said yes without hesitation. And just like that, I was back on the ladder, not at the top, not even close, but on it. I want to pause here and share something else, because while I was struggling through all this, I started reading biographies, books about people who'd failed, just like me, and come back stronger. One night, I picked up a copy of Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. If you've never read it, do yourself a favor. Phil Knight talks about starting Nike with borrowed money and selling shoes out of the trunk of his car. For years, he operated in debt, barely scraping by, doubted by friends and family. Nike, the billion-dollar empire, almost didn't exist. That hit me hard, because it reminded me, everyone starts somewhere. Everyone struggles. Everyone doubts themselves. But the ones who win are the ones who don't quit. Back in my life, the moving job was brutal. Early mornings, late nights, carrying sofas up 4 flights of stairs. But there was something beautiful about physical work. Sweat, muscle aches, blistered hands. It was honest. And for the first time, I started sleeping better. I started eating better. And slowly, I started thinking better. A few months into that job, I met a guy named Carlos, mid-40s, former Marine, built like a tank. Carlos was the crew leader, tough, no nonsense, but fair. One day after a long job, I asked him how he stayed so disciplined. He shrugged and said, "I don't negotiate with myself. When the alarm goes off, I get up. When there's work to do, I do it. Feelings don't get a vote." That line stuck with me. Feelings don't get a vote. From that day, every time I wanted to hit snooze, every time I wanted to skip the gym, every time I wanted to give less than my best, I whispered that line to myself, and it worked. Over the next year, things slowly shifted. I moved into a better apartment, bought a reliable used car, started saving money. And at night, after work, I started studying online marketing, social media management, SEO, copywriting. Why? Because I wanted more. And here's another truth. Wanting more doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you human. So, I studied, built a small freelance business on the side. At first, it was tiny. $1.50 here, $100 there. But then, a small client recommended me to another client, and another. And soon, I was making more from my side hustle than from the moving job. One morning, I walked into Carlos's office and gave my 2 weeks' notice. He smiled, shook my hand, and said, "Proud of you, kid. Go build something." So I did. Fast forward 3 years. I'm sitting in a coffee shop downtown, laptop open, inbox full of new client emails, a steady stream of income from my business. More importantly, a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. And on my desk, a small dog-eared notebook. Inside, a quote I'd written on page 1, back when I was still broke and broken. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And here's the part that matters most. If you're reading this right now, and you're in that dark place, feeling stuck, overwhelmed, defeated, I want you to know, you're not alone, you're not broken, and you are not done. Because what comes next, the comeback, it's yours to write. One step at a time, one day at a time. No magic, no shortcuts, just grit, persistence, and belief. Belief that even if today was hard, tomorrow is a new chance, a new step. And eventually, when you look back, you'll realize every tear, every late night, every failure, it was building you into the person you were meant to become. The thing about momentum is, it doesn't announce itself. It starts small, tiny victories. quiet moments that most people overlook. For me, momentum started with waking up before the sun. At first, it wasn't intentional. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of unpaid bills, looming deadlines, and growing responsibilities making sleep impossible. But over time, I realized early mornings were the only part of the day I could fully control. So I made a decision. Every morning at 5 a.m., I would get up, drink a glass of water, and move my body. Some days that meant a short jog around the block. Other days, it was push-ups on my bedroom floor. But I moved, and that movement led to energy. That energy led to focus, and that focus led to better decisions. At the same time, I kept feeding my mind. While other people played video games or scrolled social media for hours, I was on YouTube watching Les Brown, Eric Thomas, and Inky Johnson. I memorized their speeches, their cadence, their inflection, their fire. I started journaling every day. Gratitude lists, micro goals, daily wins. I wasn't chasing perfection. I was chasing progress. I learned this from reading James Clear's Atomic Habits. One line that stuck: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So I built systems. I tracked my habits on the back of my closet door using an old whiteboard. Water intake, workouts, sales calls for my freelance business, number of rejection emails received. Yes, I counted rejections, because every no was one step closer to a yes. It became a game. Every tally mark was a battle scar, proof that I was still in the fight. Then came the next big break. I landed a long-term contract with a small e-commerce brand based out of Atlanta. They needed help with social media, email marketing, and product descriptions. I said yes, even though I wasn't 100% sure how to do everything they wanted. But here's the secret no one tells you. Most people are figuring it out as they go. So I learned fast. Late nights reading marketing blogs, watching copywriting webinars, reverse engineering successful email campaigns from brands like Nike, Gymshark, and Airbnb. I pulled 12-hour workdays, sometimes 16. Coffee became my blood type, but I loved it. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't working just to survive. I was building. And then the phone rang. It was Carlos, my old crew leader from the moving job. "Kid," he said, "we're putting together a leadership workshop for some of the new hires. I told the boss about you, about how far you've come. I want you to come speak to them." I almost laughed. Me? Speaking? But Carlos didn't take no for an answer. So I said yes. The following Saturday, I stood in front of 30 guys wearing steel-toed boots and faded t-shirts. My heart pounded. My palms were sweaty. But when I told them about my lowest point, sitting on the floor with an unopened beer, jobless, girlfriend gone, hopeless, they listened. When I told them about the YouTube videos, the early mornings, the whiteboard on my closet door, they nodded. And when I ended with, "If I can climb out, so can you," they clapped. Some even stood. That day changed me, because I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was inspiring. That speech led to another invitation, and another. Soon I was speaking at community colleges, small business networking events, even a youth group at a local church. Each time I told my story, raw, honest, no sugarcoating. I told them about the nights I considered quitting, the jobs I lost, the friends I disappointed. I told them about the discipline it took to rebuild, one small decision at a time. I quoted people like Eric Thomas. "Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever." And Les Brown. "You don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great." And each time, people came up afterward, shook my hand, and told me, Man, I needed to hear that today. Around that same time, I started training for my first 5K race. Now, let me be clear. I am not a natural runner. My first practice run, I barely made it a mile without stopping to catch my breath. But I stuck with it 3 times a week. Rain or shine, I ran. By race day, I crossed that finish line with tears in my eyes and legs like jelly. Because that finish line wasn't just about 3.1 miles. It was proof that I could set a goal and finish it. That mattered. More than I can explain. Then came the biggest turning point yet. One night, sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through LinkedIn, I saw a job posting, motivational speaker needed, national high school tour, paid travel, competitive salary, seeking real stories of resilience. It felt like fate. I applied. The interview process was brutal. Video auditions, phone interviews, sample speeches. But 3 weeks later, I got the email. Welcome to the team. I sat in silence, staring at the screen, not sure whether to laugh, cry, or scream, because 3 years earlier, I couldn't even pay my cell phone bill. Now, I was about to spend a year traveling across the country, speaking to thousands of students, telling them my story, showing them that failure wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. That year on the road changed me forever. I met kids battling depression, teens from broken homes, students who'd been told by teachers and parents that they'd never amount to anything. And each time I stood on stage, microphone in hand, I told them the truth, that I wasn't special. I wasn't lucky. I was just stubborn. I refused to quit. I told them about people like J.K. Rowling, rejected by 12 publishers before finding success. I told them about Michael Jordan, cut from his high school basketball team. I told them about Oprah, fired from her first TV job. And I told them about me, the guy who started with nothing but a cracked windshield, maxed out credit cards, and a borrowed dream. That tour ended, but my speaking career didn't. I launched a YouTube channel called The Long Road Up. At first, I had 14 subscribers. Most of them were my friends and family, but I didn't care. Every week, I posted new videos, motivational talks, book summaries, personal stories. Slowly, the audience grew. Hundreds, then thousands. One video went semi-viral, 50,000 views overnight. That video brought speaking invitations from corporate events, colleges, leadership summits, and one day, I got an email that floored me. We'd like to feature your story in Success magazine. Sitting in my small apartment, holding that issue in my hands, seeing my face on page 34, I thought back to the night I sat in the dark, thinking about quitting on life. And I smiled, because I knew none of this would have happened if I had given up that night. Momentum is a funny thing. For years, it feels like you're pushing a broken down car uphill. Sweat pouring, muscles aching, feet slipping, people driving by barely noticing, maybe even laughing. But then, almost overnight, it feels like the wheels start turning on their own. People see you, doors start opening, and strangers begin asking how you did it. But here's the secret. The grind didn't change. Only the visibility did. After the article in Success magazine, I noticed a shift. My inbox started filling up. Event planners, podcast hosts, school counselors, people wanting me to speak, share my story, inspire their teams, their students, their audiences. At first, the imposter syndrome was deafening. Who was I? Just a guy who'd spent most of his 20s broke and lost. But then I remembered something Inky Johnson once said in one of his speeches. You're already qualified because you lived it. So I leaned in. I started saying yes to every opportunity. big or small, high paying or free, because every stage, every microphone, every chance to impact one person mattered. One weekend, I flew to Dallas for a small leadership conference. Maybe 40 people in the room, folding chairs, fluorescent lighting. But halfway through my talk, as I told the story about Carlos and the phrase "feelings don't get a vote," I noticed something. People were wiping tears from their eyes. Afterward, one woman approached me, mid-50s, professional, well-dressed. She pulled me aside and said, "My son is 22. He's going through what you went through. Tonight, I'm going to send him your YouTube channel. Thank you for reminding me he still has time to turn it around." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about legacy, impact, leaving people better than I found them. Around that same time, I started getting invited to speak at correctional facilities, juvenile detention centers, minimum security prisons. At first, I was nervous. Would they even listen? Would they care? But the first time I stood in front of 200 young men in blue jumpsuits, I saw it in their eyes. They were hungry for hope. I told them the same truth I'd been telling students and CEOs, that rock bottom wasn't the end. It was a beginning, that their past didn't define their future, that one good decision, followed by another and another, could change everything. After the session, a young man named Jamal walked up to me. He said, "When I get out, I'm going to write my story too. You made me believe I still got one left in me." I shook his hand and said, "I'll be waiting to read it." Back home, my YouTube audience kept growing. 10,000 subscribers, then 25,000, then 50,000. Brands started reaching out for collaborations. I got my first paid brand deal, $500 to feature a book about resilience. It wasn't a huge check, but it felt like validation. I remember staring at that PayPal notification, laughing to myself, remembering how just a few years earlier, I couldn't even afford a $5 pizza. Now I was getting paid to talk about the very struggle that almost broke me. Life's funny like that, but let me pause and say this. It wasn't all sunshine and viral videos. With growth came new challenges, haters, negative comments, people saying, "You're just capitalizing on struggle. Who do you think you are giving advice?" At first, the criticism stung. Badly. There were nights I'd lie awake replaying negative comments over and over in my head. But then, one evening, while scrolling through comments, I found one that changed everything. It simply said, "I was going to end my life tonight. Then I found your video. Thank you for giving me one more reason to stay." I sat there, staring at that comment, tears rolling down my face. And right then, I made a promise to myself. If one person out there needed my story, then no troll, no hater, no keyboard warrior was going to stop me from telling it. Around this time, I invested in myself. I hired a speaking coach, a guy named Marcus from Atlanta, former TEDx speaker. Marcus taught me how to own the stage, how to use silence, how to craft a story arc that pulled audiences in and left them wanting more. One thing he said stuck with me forever. You don't just tell people your story, you invite them into it. So I practiced for hours in front of mirrors, recording myself, studying the greats, Lisa Nichols, Mel Robbins, Tony Robbins, Eric Thomas. I picked up tips from all of them, and slowly I found my voice. Not just my literal voice, but my voice as a leader, a storyteller, a motivator. The more I spoke, the more opportunities came. I got invited to corporate retreats, startup accelerators, nonprofit leadership trainings. One event flew me out to San Diego to speak to 500 small business owners. Standing on that stage, looking out at a sea of entrepreneurs, I opened with this. 5 years ago, I was sleeping in my car. Today, I'm standing here, proof that it doesn't matter where you start. It matters where you decide to go next. The standing ovation at the end wasn't just applause. It felt like closure on every sleepless night, every rejection letter, every moment I almost quit. After that event, something huge happened. A talent agent approached me. He specialized in motivational speakers. We had coffee the next day. By the end of the meeting, I had signed my first speaking representation contract. My fee doubled, then tripled. The stages got bigger. Airports became my second home. Hotel rooms became temporary addresses. And yet, every time I stood backstage, mic in hand, about to walk on stage, I reminded myself, it's not about me. It's about the one person in that audience, the one person who needed hope that day. And in the middle of all this growth, I never stopped telling my full truth. I told them about the mornings I still woke up with anxiety, about how I sometimes doubted myself even now. I told them about how success doesn't erase your past, but it does give you the power to rewrite your future. I talked openly about therapy, about mental health, about burnout. I told them, healing isn't linear. Success isn't either. And the more honest I got, the more people connected. Because nobody relates to perfection, but everyone relates to real. Then, life threw me a new test, one I didn't see coming. My mom, the strongest woman I knew, had a stroke. It happened one Friday morning while I was at the airport, boarding a flight to New York. The call came as I was buckling my seatbelt. I left the plane before takeoff, rushed to the hospital, spent the next 2 weeks sleeping in a chair by her hospital bed, holding her hand, reading to her, talking even when she couldn't respond. For the first time in years, the speaking gigs stopped. The YouTube uploads paused. The business emails went unanswered, because in that moment, none of it mattered more than her. Watching her fight to regain her speech, her movement, her independence, I was reminded the real battle is always internal. Doctors worked on her body, but she had to work on her mindset. Every day, I whispered to her, "Small steps, Mom, small steps." And every day, she fought. 3 months later, she walked, slowly but proudly, out of that hospital. When she did, I cried harder than I had in years. That experience taught me, success isn't just stages and applause. It's being present for the people who matter. It's love. It's showing up even when it's inconvenient. When I returned to work, I felt different, more grounded, more intentional. My speeches shifted too, less about chasing money or status, more about gratitude, service, purpose. That's when the book idea hit me. I decided to write down everything. The nights in the car, the gym whiteboard, Carlos and the moving job, the YouTube comments that saved me as much as I saved others, the prison speeches, the school tours, the hospital waiting room, every messy, beautiful, painful, redemptive piece of the journey. It took 6 months, hundreds of late-night writing sessions, coffee-fueled mornings, self-doubt creeping in every other chapter. But I finished it, titled it, The Long Road Up. Just like this story. And when it launched, something amazing happened. Amazon bestseller in the self-help motivational category in the first week. Thousands of copies sold, dozens of speaking invites followed, and hundreds of emails poured in from people saying, "Your story sounds like mine. I felt seen. Now I believe I can change too." And that's why I keep going. Because I know right now, somewhere out there, there's someone sitting in their car, alone, defeated, thinking about giving up. And maybe, just maybe, when they hear this story, they'll choose to stand up one more time, just like I did, just like Carlos did, just like Jamal did, just like my mom did, and just like you will too. Success has this strange way of sneaking up on you. One day, you're worried about making rent. A few years later, you're sitting backstage at a sold-out auditorium with 2,000 people waiting for you to speak. But here's something people don't talk about often. When your life starts changing, your relationships do too. Some people cheer you on. Others disappear. It started subtly. Friends I used to hang out with every weekend stopped calling. Old coworkers who used to laugh at my jokes now seem distant. Some family members whispered behind my back, "Who does he think he is now?" For a while, I let it get to me. I questioned myself, wondered if I was changing too much, too fast. But then one day, while scrolling through old journal entries, I came across something I'd written 3 years earlier. You're not responsible for how others handle your growth. I read that sentence 3 times, and just like that, I let go of the guilt. Because here's the truth. You can't shrink yourself to keep other people comfortable. Your job is to grow, to rise, to become who you're meant to be. And if people can't handle that, that's their battle, not yours. So I kept growing. I invested in more coaching, hired a business mentor who had scaled multiple 7-figure speaking brands. He taught me how to build a real business around my passion, how to package keynote programs, negotiate contracts, market myself without feeling like a sellout. We built funnels, created online courses, launched digital coaching programs. I built a small team, 2 virtual assistants, and a video editor for my YouTube content. Suddenly, I wasn't just a speaker. I was running a company, but with growth came burnout. And I learned the hard way that ambition without boundaries is dangerous. There was one stretch where I spoke at 15 events in 20 days, flying coast to coast, sleeping in hotel rooms, eating airport food, barely seeing sunlight. One morning in a hotel bathroom in Chicago, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Dark circles, pale skin, eyes glazed. That day, right after my keynote, I called my business coach and said, "I need help. I'm running myself into the ground." He laughed, but in a kind way, and said, "Welcome to the next lesson, sustainability." So I scaled back, hired a personal assistant to manage my calendar, said no to gigs that didn't align with my mission, started scheduling downtime on purpose. Because here's something every dream chaser needs to hear. Hustle will build your dream, but rest will protect it. Around this time, a new opportunity came my way. A nonprofit organization that worked with at-risk youth reached out. They wanted me to run a week-long leadership camp for teenagers from foster care. The pay was small, but the mission, big. So I said yes. That week changed my life. I met kids who had been abandoned, abused, told by adults their whole lives that they'd never amount to anything. On day 1, most of them sat with arms crossed, faces hard, trust broken. But by day 3, after countless small group sessions, team building exercises, and late night campfire talks, something shifted. They started opening up. One boy named Malek, just 16, stood up in front of the group and said, "I didn't think I'd live past 18, but after this week, I want to see what happens next." That sentence wrecked me. I hugged him, told him, "You've got a whole story ahead of you. Don't let this chapter define you." When the week ended, I promised myself, I'm going to build something just for kids like him. That's when the idea for my nonprofit was born. I called it Next Chapter Foundation. Its mission: provide mentorship, life skills, and motivational programming for youth from underprivileged backgrounds. We started small, a few weekend workshops at community centers, then school partnerships. after-school programs, summer leadership retreats. The foundation became my second heart, because no matter how high my speaking career went, I never forgot where I started. I never forgot the nights I sat alone, wondering if my life had any purpose left. I wanted to make sure no kid ever felt that alone again. One day, while visiting a school in Chicago's South Side, I met a teacher named Ms. Ramirez, mid-40s, stern but kind. After my assembly, she pulled me aside and said, "You don't know this, but 5 of the kids in that room are on suicide watch. Your talk today, it mattered more than you know." That night, back at my hotel, I opened my email inbox and found 14 messages from students who had attended that assembly. 4 of them mentioned that they were seriously thinking about ending their lives until they heard me speak. That night, I cried, not tears of sadness, but of gratitude, because I realized this wasn't just a career anymore. It was a calling, a responsibility, a mission. That realization led me to a new level of discipline. I cleaned up my diet, started therapy again, doubled down on my reading, woke up every morning at 5 a.m., not because I had to, but because I wanted to protect my energy for the people counting on me. I started studying trauma-informed communication, learned how to speak to people battling anxiety, depression, PTSD, because I didn't just want to motivate, I wanted to heal, help people rebuild, inside and out. Then, something I never saw coming happened. I got an email from a TEDx event coordinator. Subject line, "We want your story on our stage." I dreamed about giving a TEDx talk for years. Now, it was happening. I spent 2 months preparing, rehearsing in front of friends, practicing timing, polishing every word. And on the day of the event, standing in front of 400 people, with cameras rolling, I opened with this. 5 years ago, I was sitting in my car, broke, jobless, ready to give up. Today, I stand here, proof that your lowest moment is not your final destination. That talk went viral. Over 2 million views in the first month. Thousands of comments. Messages from all over the world. People in Kenya, India, Australia, South America, all saying the same thing. Thank you for giving me hope. My booking calendar exploded. My book sales tripled. My YouTube subscriber count passed 200,000. But more than any of that, I got to see real people, real lives changing. Emails from people who left toxic jobs. Messages from women who finally left abusive relationships. Photos from students holding up college acceptance letters, saying, "I didn't think I was smart enough, but I remembered your story." And yet, even with all the success, I stayed grounded by one simple habit. Every night before bed, I opened my old journal and wrote 3 things. 1, one thing I was grateful for. 2, one person I helped that day. 3, one thing I learned. That ritual kept me connected to why I started, because no amount of views, or followers, or speaking fees can replace the feeling of knowing. Today, I made a difference. That's what this journey became about. Not money, not fame, not validation, but impact, legacy, purpose. So to anyone reading this, wondering if it's too late, wondering if you've messed up too much, fallen too far, lost too many battles, let me remind you, you're not done. Your story is still being written. You've survived every hard day up until now. That's not coincidence. That's resilience. And tomorrow, it's another blank page, waiting for you to write the next chapter. By the time my TEDx talk crossed 5 million views, everything felt surreal. I was being recognized in airports. People were tagging me on Instagram from halfway across the world, quoting my speeches. My DMs were flooded with messages from people sharing their struggles, asking for advice, telling me how much my words had helped. But with all of that came a new responsibility. Staying human, staying connected, staying real. One cold January morning, I woke up to an email with a subject line that nearly made me drop my phone. We would like to invite you to speak at Google headquarters. Google, Silicon Valley, the place where some of the smartest and most ambitious people on the planet work. For a kid from Cleveland who once struggled to pay for gas, this felt like a different universe. But when I walked into that building a month later, standing in front of hundreds of Google employees, I opened my talk with the same words I always did. I wasn't supposed to be here. I told them about failure, rejection, self-doubt, sleeping in my car, questioning my own worth. And when I finished, the standing ovation felt like something out of a movie. But more than the applause, what I'll always remember is what happened after. A young engineer, maybe 25, waited in line just to shake my hand and say, "I've been battling depression for the last year. Your story, it pulled me out of my head today. Thank you." That moment reminded me, pain is universal. It doesn't care how much money you make or how impressive your job title is. We're all fighting battles no one can see. The next year, I took on my biggest project yet, launching the Long Road Up podcast. The goal, bring on guests who had fought their own uphill battles and won. Athletes, entrepreneurs, teachers, single parents, artists. Every week, I sat down with someone who had a story of resilience. We talked about rock bottoms, breakthrough moments, tears, laughter, healing. One guest, a woman named Tasha, shared how she went from being homeless with 2 kids to owning her own bakery. Another guest, Mark, talked about surviving cancer and then running an Ironman triathlon a year later. Each episode, raw and unfiltered, and the audience loved it. Thousands of downloads turned into tens of thousands. Emails poured in from listeners. This podcast gets me through my commute. Your guests remind me that I'm not alone. I haven't smiled this much in months. But then, life hit again. This time, it was grief. Carlos, my old crew leader, my mentor, my first real champion, passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. I found out through a Facebook post from one of the guys at the moving company. When I read the words, I froze, then cried like a child. I flew back to Cleveland for the funeral. The chapel was packed. Dozens of guys from the old crew stood in the back, dressed in black, looking heartbroken and lost. When I stepped up to speak at his service, I held back tears and said, "Carlos taught me how to show up when I wanted to quit. He told me feelings didn't get a vote, and because of him, I kept going. We all did. His legacy is written on every life he touched." I ended my speech the way he ended every morning meeting at the warehouse. "Let's get after it." That line became my new mantra. Losing Carlos made me reflect on my own legacy. What was I leaving behind? What was I building that would outlive me? So, I made a decision. I expanded the Next Chapter Foundation. We launched scholarship programs, partnered with more schools, started a mentorship initiative connecting former at-risk youth who turned their lives around with kids currently struggling. Jamal, the young man I met years ago in the correctional facility, became one of our first mentors. Today, he's studying social work at a community college. Full circle moments, everywhere. Around that same time, I was invited to do something I never imagined. Give a commencement speech at a university. Standing on that stage, in front of hundreds of graduates in caps and gowns, I thought back to when I couldn't even afford community college textbooks. And I told them, your degree matters, but your grit matters more. Because out there, life won't always care about your GPA. It'll care about how you handle rejection, how you bounce back from failure, how you keep going even when it's hard. That speech went viral too. Shared on LinkedIn, quoted in articles. Teachers started using clips of it in their classrooms. And every time I watched one of those clips, I smiled and whispered, "Thank you, Carlos." As my audience grew, the pressure did too. Managing a team, keeping up with content, writing my second book, balancing speaking gigs and foundation work. Some nights, the stress felt overwhelming. But then I remembered a lesson I learned long ago from reading David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. When you think you're done, you're only at 40%. So I kept pushing, but with smarter boundaries. I hired a therapist again, started going on silent retreats once a year, took weekends off, no matter what, because growth without rest isn't sustainable. And if burnout takes you out, you can't help anybody. One winter, while reviewing foundation applications, I came across a letter that stopped me cold. It was from a 17-year-old girl named Maya. She wrote, "I found your YouTube videos when I was at my lowest. They helped me believe I could survive high school. And now I'm applying to college. I want to be a motivational speaker one day, like you, reading your words." I smiled through tears, because that's the point, isn't it? To create ripple effects you may never fully see. To lift others so they can lift others. Legacy in action. As I sit here writing this final section, looking back on everything, from that cold apartment in Cleveland to standing on stages I once dreamed about, I realized something simple but profound. Life didn't give me a roadmap. It gave me challenges, rejection, loneliness, loss. But it also gave me moments of grace, mentors like Carlos, audiences who listened, emails that reminded me why I started. And every day, I get to choose, keep going, or give up. I choose to keep going. So if you've made it this far, reading every word of this story, here's what I want you to know. You're not defined by your worst day, or your biggest mistake, or the times you fell apart. You're defined by your decision right now to stand up, keep moving, and write the next chapter of your life on your terms. Because even when it feels like the long road up, step by step, day by day, you're getting stronger, wiser, better. And one day, you'll look back, smile, and realize everything you went through, every tear, every late night, every failure, it was preparing you for exactly where you're meant to be. So stand tall, breathe deep, and get after it. Your story's just getting started.